MS Now.
Welcome back. MS Now has learned that the Department of Homeland Security's plan to convert 11 former retail distribution warehouses into ICE detention megacenters is facing a big legal challenge over sewage, specifically issues regarding water supply, wastewater processing, or both. And some of those issues will cost tens of millions of dollars to fix. That's if they're fixable at all. Warehousing detainees is the next phase of the DHS effort to make good on President Trump's campaign pledge of mass deportations. And to make that happen, the agency has hurried through purchases of existing buildings rather than constructing new ones. The Associated Press recently cited a senior DHS official saying the department would pause warehouse purchases and, quote, scrutinize the ones it's already built. But new DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin has given no indication the agency is abandoning the warehouse model, which is still plagued with all these issues. I want to bring in here on set Democratic Congressman Gabe Vasquez of New Mexico. He's a member of the House Agriculture and Armed Services Committee. You spent part of the recess period actually visiting some of these detention centers. I know that you went to one that was in Montana, I believe. Can you talk a little bit about the problems that you're seeing on the ground and the ways that the administration is or isn't addressing them when lawmakers like you have brought it to their attention, because you have?
Yeah, well, April 6th, I visited Camp East, Montana, which is actually in El Paso, Texas, right on the border. It's a facility. It's one of the largest facilities of its kind. At the time, it was holding about 800 folks. It has a capacity of about 5,000. Look, what I saw was a makeshift, essentially, prison in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert, places where it reaches up to 510 degrees during the summer. I saw a contractor there that had no experience building such a facility. In fact, I think that was their first contract. And I saw a report by the IG that was just released days before I visited, citing inadequate health care, 3 deaths that had happened at that detention center since the time it's been open, and facilities, honestly, that were more akin to a high maximum security prison than for folks, the majority of whom were there, that had not committed a single violent crime. And I got to speak with detainees and see some of the issues that they were facing. But, it's substandard living for this country and for our values that we have, for the amount of people in there who, some had been in this country for 22 years without a speeding ticket, to be behind concertina wire, not be allowed access to their medications, not be allowed to communicate with their American relatives. I mean, just shameful, and especially the taxpayers are footing the bill for facilities like this.
Yeah, I think we've heard stories like this from across facilities across the country, and lawmakers have not been quiet about it, nor should they be. The reporting has been good about it, and yet the administration, what are they saying?
Well, I mean, I don't know how they can justify this exorbitant amount of money that they are spending to stand up this network of detention centers across the country. Every taxpayer in the United States should be enraged because they're not paying market prices for these properties. They are just hurling money all across the country, hoping that some of these facilities can be retrofitted without doing the adequate vetting or even bringing in the right contractors, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking about scaling up detention to this level, I mean, this is like Stephen Miller's dystopian fantasy, is to have a network of warehouses that are holding people, mostly Latinos, mostly Hispanics, immigrants all across the country. There is no due diligence. Money is being blown. And this is all from that $75 billion that ICE was essentially gifted by Republicans in Congress through the reconciliation bill.
I'm so glad you brought it back to that central point, because the Department of Homeland Security is still shut down. There are open questions about when Congress will actually move to reopen it, and if that deal includes any kinds of guardrails, which is why Democrats have said we're not voting for this until we start figuring out how to regulate this agency around the deportation agenda. I think there was some thinking when Senator Markwayne Mullin became Secretary Markwayne Mullin that there would be greater transparency, that he's someone who was a member of Congress. Have you noticed a difference in the information flow from the Nome era at DHS to the Mullin era?
I've not. And in fact, just as of yesterday, I sent another letter to the Department of Homeland Security and to ICE specifically. I had listed about 40 questions that I wanted to answer, basic questions, such as standards of care inside the facility. Out of those 40 or so questions, I had one question answered. As a member of Congress that has oversight duties, that should be a steward of those tax dollars and how they're being used. Look, this is why they did this under the cover of the reconciliation bill. The $75 billion that ICE has no directives on how it is to be spent, no control of Congress. this was done on purpose, essentially to keep members of Congress from having accountability in this process of standing up these facilities. And I'm sad to say that, look, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, I hope that he brings a different approach, especially to enforcement activities at ICE. But what I've seen so far is that every member of the president's cabinet has one boss, and it is not the American people. It is not the Constitution. It is not the rule of law. It is the president and his advisors. And so I don't expect anything different.
And it's also not being responsive, at least not yet, to oversight requests from members of the body that he was once a part of, both in the House and in the Senate, even though his Senate term was much shorter than his time spent in the House. I think it's also important to point out that you're not someone who comes to this conversation just with criticisms of the way the administration is carrying out this policy. You are also someone who is trying to propose solutions. And I wonder if you can briefly talk us through those, as well as whether or not you think that they can gain any traction in this Congress, because there's a very slim number of Republicans who are open to doing something on immigration. Margins are slim. Is that an opportunity for someone like you?
Absolutely is. And look, we've seen that the American people, the majority of the American people, disapprove of the handling of immigration enforcement by this administration. And as Democrats and some Republicans, hopefully, we should be able to come together with a plan to fix it. Right? So how do we fix these issues that we currently have? I represent a district with 180 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, a district that before the Gadsden Purchase was Mexico, and before that, the Treaty of Guadalupe, a district that thrives on international trade. We also grow the world's finest green and red chili. We have.
I know, I've been there. It is very
yes,
good.
It is wonderful, and really an economy that depends in so many ways on migrant labor, and on the backs of migrants. Our economy has been built across the country, and so if we're going to talk about reforming our immigration system, one, we have to start with border security. Right? I have 3 ports of entry. Most of the illicit drugs and illicit trafficking of goods and people comes through our ports of entry. We got to shore up funding to support the technology that currently exists. I mean, we can fly to the moon. We can damn sure secure our ports of entry, and we should be investing in that rather than these warehouses across the country. We have the technology, ASTs, aerostats, force multipliers. We need comms infrastructure on the border. Democrats should be supportive of this in general to strengthen border security. Now, this is what CBP agents in my district on the ground have asked me for.
Yeah.
Second, we have to have a competitive economy. And we have to realize that in places like the caregiving economy, as an example, or for farm workers or other manual labor jobs, when you talk to employers, they say, look, if we didn't have immigrants, our businesses would shut down tomorrow.
And I think that is one of the economic underpinnings of this argument. And frankly, Democrats are playing catch up when it comes to legislating and policy building around immigration. It seems like you've put together a bit of a framework, and we'll see ultimately where it goes, even as you make these criticisms against the administration on deportation. We'll leave it there for now. Democratic Congressman Gabe Vasquez of New Mexico, thank you for coming on. Before you leave, I do want to ask you, because we asked the viewers, why are they awake? Carrie emails in and writes, I'm awake because I'm a substitute teacher who picked up a before-school job that starts today, getting the kiddos on the bus. Have a great day. Kyle sends along this familiar photo and says, I'm up early, making sure the building is ready for another hectic day on the Hill. Okay, you know it's bad and you spend too much time in the Capitol when you can identify what building it is based on the brick, right?
That's right. I think that's the Russell Senate building.
Yep.
Yes, and that's the other side of the aisle. Perhaps you have a more functioning chamber of Congress on that side currently than in the House, but I do recognize that.
I don't know. The House is the Wild West, and I do love it for that.
Yeah.
And Michael shares this adorable photo and writes, we're awake way too early because Sophie wants her breakfast. And Sophie should get it with a face like that.
Absolutely. I mean, what a beautiful puppy.
What a beautiful
things that bring us joy. We need more.
I know. I say to the viewers and to all of our guests every time, this segment is like the levity that we need after going through a whole show. So,
Absolutely.
Congressman, thank you. Appreciate it. I'll see you on the Hill. And coming up next on Way Too Early, we're going to show you the first ever video of Earth sinking below the lunar horizon in a unique vantage captured by NASA's mission around the moon. This was wonderful. And coming up on Morning Joe, you'll get the latest on U.S. peace talks with Iran as Vice President J.D. Vance is set to travel today to Pakistan ahead of a looming ceasefire deadline. Plus, the president's Federal Reserve Chair pick is going to face lawmakers on the Senate Banking Committee in a key hearing today. A member of that panel, Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, is going to be a guest. Also ahead, a look at the latest projects from Emmy Award-winning actor Henry Winkler. Morning Joe. It's just moments away.